Yeah, okay. And I have
or
to
in the
I have
general discussion.
I have a little kitchen work to do, so I'll be
Okay.
back in a minute. Yeah.
Okay.
So, welcome to the September 24th, 2024 session of TAPR and HamSCI technical session. My name is Dave, KV0S, and this week, been doing some stuff with TAPR. We've been trying to catch up on a few things going and preparing for the annual meeting and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to do some cleanup on my radio room and some of my other tools and get in a place where I can actually be more productive. So that's it for me. Next on the list, we have Nathaniel, W2NAF. Go ahead, Nathaniel.
Thanks, Steve. I've been continuing to work on advising students at the University of Scranton, keep classes going. We're teaching W3USR, and the Murgas Sandwich Radio Club is now teaching a class for people who are blind and visually impaired, teaching them ham radio at the Lackawanna Blind Association. So we've met about, this was our third class today, so that's going along nicely. We're having local a ham from an who's a professor at the neighboring university, Tony Kapolka. He is coming in tomorrow to give a lecture, a talk to our students about, now that you have a ham radio station, what do you do with it? So that we're working on that. We're planning the W3USR dedication, which is going to be Friday, October 25th. Anyone who would like to come to the University of Scranton, we're going to have a lecture that day around 3 in the afternoon, followed by a little reception, and then there's going to be a buffet dinner in the evening, and the station will be open for operation. And then, we're continuing all of the coordination with the different projects here. And I'm also experimenting with the effects of single sideband HF noise on baby sleeping patterns. And we've found that that 40-meter sideband has a calming effect on babies, and we think that this information could be useful to parents across the nation. So back to net.
Very good. And congratulations on creative thinking. So, next on the list, is Dave, KD0EAG. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello. I've been working a bit on um, the web interface for RX888 this week, but I've also been rebuilding a laptop and some other machines, reconstituting my world in the aftermath of a misdirected bit of Diet Coke. But uh, but various things, some other things too, but none of them really were ready to report. Back to you.
Okay. Next on the list, let's go to Bob, N5BRG. Go ahead, Bob.
Hello, folks. My progress this week has been on fighting issues with the computer that was recording my Meteor stuff that decided to quit working. So I think the heat got to it here, and rebuilding that system and getting it all back up again. But that's the main thing to report. So back to you, Dave.
Okay. Next on the list, let's see, Dave H, W6OQ. Go ahead.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So I'm here trying to learn stuff, but also looking at participating on the, I guess we're calling it a reference antenna development design.
Well, please do. We're always interested in having as many good ideas as possible. Okay. Next on the list is Bill Kelsey. Go ahead. Bill, you're muted.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I just popped in here. I wanted to see what was going on. It's been a long time since you've been on, so I'll just listen and see what's happened the last couple months. Since I've been here, and see you next week. Back to you, Dave.
Okay, very good. Next on the list is, let's see. Oh, Jim, K4BSE. Go ahead.
Good evening, all. Well, I guess the big thing with me right now is that I'm going to be participating in the 105th anniversary of the first transmission of WWV this weekend. And we're going to have stations on at various places in the country in various modes under the call sign WW0 WWV. I got to learn to pronounce that one a little bit easier. That is the call of the WWV Amateur Radio Club. I'm signed up right now to operate sideband from 9 till 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time this Saturday. I will probably be operating a few more hours too. Back to that, K4BSE.
Well, thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds like an interesting project.
Yeah. And Jim, you can also feel free to put a spot on the HamSCI listserv if you ever want to spot yourself for that.
Okay, thanks.
So, next on the list is Clint, KA7OEI. Go ahead, Clint. Is Clint there? He's mic muted at the moment. Well, we'll go on down the list. Next on the list is Dave Julian, WB9YIG. Go ahead.
Good evening, folks. Thanks a lot. I managed to actually find about another 20 square feet of floor space in my pole barn today or this week. It's taken that long, and about another 1,000 square feet to go. So it's a long process. Back to the net. Thanks.
It's amazing how much stuff is sitting around.
That's the truth.
Next on the list, we have Dave New in 8 SBE. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, hi, everybody. And this week we're camping, actually. We're just outside of the entrance to Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Oh,
so
very good.
Yeah,
nice part of the country.
Yeah, it's a fall rally for the RV Radio Network, folks.
Oh.
So yeah, that's what's happening here. And again, I'm operating as a fly on the wall here, but nice to see everybody. Back to that.
Very good. Next on the list is David McGaw in 1 HAC. Go ahead, David.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a busy couple of weeks. This weekend I was on a quick junket to Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. We were having a family gathering centered around my grandfather's papers. He was a professor there of English and had some interesting diaries and such. But also watched the Michigan game, which we were into. Did not go to the stadium, did not want to blow my ears out with 110,000 people around. But it was a good game. But more related to the current, I've been trying to do some evaluations, comparisons of antennas. My 40-meter horizontal loop is my reference standard on the amplified. It does very nicely, but that's a little big for us to expect people to put up. So the most immediate is that, as I've mentioned, I have a 1.3 meter wire loop with the LZ1AQ type preamp on it. It actually compares surprisingly favorably with my big antenna. Gives comparable levels. I'm sure it has a higher noise level, but I haven't been able to done a quantitative measurement of that. I do have an E-fail antenna It seems to be an S9 noise box at this point. I think I need to do a little debug on that guy. Yeah, I hope we can come together on ideas for people to use as an antenna. And I know that I suspect that the small loop I'm using is probably quite comparable to the DX engineering. It would be interesting to compare that. Back to Net.
Okay. Next on the list is Dylan, KN6 IVW. Go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, how have you guys been? It's been a while for me. Well, coming back after a couple weeks of finally being able to join, have activities that go on constantly Monday. So yeah. I have plenty going on. Not enough time to talk about it though. But I would say coolest thing, not coolest thing, best thing so far. Sorry, let me move this. I'm very slow. I'm not sure if you can see it on the other account that I have on here, but I have a milling machine now. I don't have it plugged in.
Very good.
And depending on if you guys do want to do a case, I can do prototyping with this milling machine. So that's the big thing, is being able to prototype with this. But currently I am having issues trying to get my Linux system that is going to be running the machine working. I cannot believe how many issues I am having with that. So if anyone who's on here knows or is very familiar with Linux, I would like help, please. There's only so much that the internet can do, and it's not really doing that well. So other than that, not really anything else. I'll send it back to Dave.
Okay, very good. Dylan gave a talk at Hamvention 2 years ago on this and 3D printing as well. So some of you were there. Next on the list is Jamal. Go ahead, Jamal.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I've been working on the last couple of months on obtaining the received powers using the IRI 2016, which is the International Reference Ionospheric Model. And now my challenge is how can I bypass using the numerical solutions in order to get the regenerations for this model by Dr. Silvera, and I hope it works. But it's really challenging because you have many ray traces to be received at the to be seen at the receiver grid. So the challenging is how can you get the right one. So there have been many tries to get the right reverse engineering for the RI model. Furthermore, I have some of the posters being accepted at the European Space Weather to be held in Coimbra, and I hope it works fine at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Next on the list is Gary, AF8A. Go ahead, Gary.
Good evening, everyone. Dave, I see that TAPR has a new president.
Yes, and we have a new board member here as well at the meeting. I was going to mention it when I get to his name on the list.
Okay, we can hold off on that. I was renewing my dues today and I saw that bit of good news. To follow up on Jim, K4BSE's comment earlier, if you have any interest in joining the WWV Amateur Radio Club and supporting the activities that happens in Fort Collins and NIST and whatnot, One of our goals for this special operating event is to come up with some new members. In the next couple of days, if you contact me, I'll put you in contact with Dave Swartz, W0DAS, and you can get a free 1-year membership if you agree to operate in the W0WWV event this weekend. So it's quite a good deal anyhow. The other thing I've been working on is the Grape One Classic. I know we're talking about doing some data type conversions, and I've been working on trying to figure out which nodes are really active, which people want to stay involved with the project, and which people have moved on, so we don't keep bugging them with a lot of emails and sending out files and so on and so forth. So that's coming along a little bit. Back to Net.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. I forgot about that.
Yes. Next on the list is Jay Morrell. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is Jay Morielli, KD2.
Oh, sorry.
KD2ZRO. No worries. I guess I was here a couple of weeks ago. Been a busy couple of weeks with consulting work, and then going on vacation. Went up to the Finger Lakes and did some hiking at Watkins Glen and the Seneca Lake, Canoga Lake. I don't know that I'm pronouncing all that right. And Ithaca. Had a great time. The personal kind of stuff. And for amateur radio, I was working on my Raspberry Pi with 2 software-defined radios. And we had a long discussion last time about software-defined radio modules. And so I'm just back to learn more.
Well, very good. Well, glad you're back. Next on the list is did I call on Jay Schwartz, WB8 SBI? Go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. I'm still under the weather and still recovering from something, a bug or something. And all I can say is I'm very glad for Medicare, traditional Medicare. I was just putting something into the chat. The Radio Club of America annual awards banquet and technical seminars will take place in New York City, Times Square, from the 21st to the 23rd of November. I'll put the link for the details in the chat. Thursday and Friday, the 21st, 22nd, are tours of all-day tours of the one on Thursday is really interesting. It's the Info Age Science and History Museum, a private guided tour that includes the Marconi wireless station and also a tour of the Bell Works Laboratory, formerly Bell Labs, and the Holmdel, HOLMDEL, Holmdel horn antenna, and I believe that's the one that was used to discover the microwave background radiation. It's also on Saturday night, the speaker at the banquet is going to be a Nobel laureate, one of the guys that got the Nobel Prize for discovering the microwave background radiation. So it's going to be an interesting time. I'll put the link in the chat for everybody. Reservations, I think, are due by the end of the month. Don't hold me to that, but the sooner you get them and get your reservations in, especially for the tour buses, because there's a limited amount of space on those things. So other than that, nothing new amateur radio wise. So I'm going to say 7-3 to all and just keep reading the mail for the rest of tonight. Back to net control.
Okay. Next on the list is Jonathan, KC3EEY. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. I don't have much to report when it comes to VLF news, although Marcus Vester, one of the members of the VLF community, he believes through using correlation and signal processing that he was able to detect the Eastern interconnect grid from his location in Germany, using the 180 hertz harmonic from my receiver feed. Actually, this is after the mains hum and harmonics gets filtered out, and he was actually able to actually detect it. It was strong enough, and he was able to detect it and filter it. There's a filter on the front end that will filter the fundamental. So it's the 180 hertz harmonic is obviously stronger because it's not filtered just by software. So that's actually really good. And I have some direction on what I need to do to get this VLF system project going. So I'm currently working on the circuit boards and the circuit design for the GPS interface box, the VLF receiver interface box, and the VLF preamp. And then I also got to thinking, how could I build something that's rugged enough for Antarctica? And I feel that that's definitely going to be a challenge. If perhaps one of my VLF receivers makes its way down to Antarctica, and unfortunately, I don't have ready access to a thermal chamber, but I still may be able to do some testing. So who knows? Other than that, that's all I have. Back to the net.
Okay. Next on the list is Michael Howen, AC0G. Go ahead.
Evening, everybody. Very little to report here. Back to net.
Okay. Next on the list is our newest TAPR board member, Paul Elliott. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, evening, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I expect it's going to be a combination of fun and aggravation and a whole bunch of learning for me. But that's a good thing. I like that. So thank you. Yeah, I've been working with. Hey, what have I been doing? Well, I just commuted from Friday Harbor down to Occidental, which is where I am now. I have been retiring the beacon blasters that I had working up in Friday Harbor and down here in Occidental. Before I left, I got the new Whisper Sonde up and running in Friday Harbor. I just got the Whisper Sonde running down here. I plan it's running on 6 bands, 80 through 10. I'm going to try to add 160 and 6 meters to it. See if I can string out a wire for 160 or at least hook up a tuner to, if I can get a few microwatts out, maybe somebody will hear me. I've been working on, speaking of WW0, WWV, these guys want to be running a couple more frequencies here. So here's our 17 and 12 meter splitter combiner. And this is a 50 megahertz basically filter. So they'll be able to get as many as 8 frequencies running simultaneously there. Been looking at synthesizer spurs and noise, kind of trading information with John Ackerman on that. We're both digging into that, looking at the boundary spur issue and just getting an idea for what can be done there. I mean, everything's working fine with my gear here. I mean, the spurious level is, we're talking about between 60 and 90 dB down. So if for ham work, it's not a problem. But it's good to see how tight, how close you can get things, how clean you can get them. Michael, I got the 888, and yeah, that little interface adapter, the clock card, it was missing one of the coupling capacitors. So that's it's not going to work with the main coupling cap not there. So I don't know, was that one that Rob gave you or I did? If it was one I gave you, I apologize. I try to check all these things out before I send them out, but I could have missed one. But I guess
I say we blame it on Rob.
yeah, that's usually what I do. So we're in perfect agreement here. And that's about it. So back to Net.
Okay. Next on the list is Phil Karn, K9Q. Go ahead, Phil.
Hey guys, I don't really have a whole lot this week, so I'm sure I'll think of something as soon as the conversation starts, but I'll pass it back for now.
Okay, well, glad you're here. Next on the list is Scott Newell in 5TNL, and he's mic muted or no mic. And next on the list is Tom in 5EG. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, hopefully I've got this all back. In the process of moving, highly not recommended if you become an accidental pack rat in the meantime. So oh my goodness. Trying to downsize by a substantial amount. And other than that, the projects have been going nowhere. So I had an email with Franco, and he said he's going to be out for a week or two and hopes to come back to the group here when he gets back. Back to the group.
Okay. And I think I've called on everybody at least once.
Dave New. Did you get Dave?
I thought I got Dave New. Yeah, he's in the Smokies. So I remember that. Anybody else got missed? I know I called on Clint, but he doesn't have a mic on. So we're open for general discussion.
I want to mention one thing. Speaking of CNC routers, if you guys are curious, I put up a little video showing how I mill out the faceplates on the Whisper Sound using my little router I have up in Friday Harbor. It's just like a 1.5 minute video on the TurnIslandSystems.com website. So just a link down below to a YouTube page just showing the milling. I have it highly sped up, otherwise, it'd be stupid to wait that long.
I also want to mention to everybody, TAPR's going to have a Zoom general session meeting in October 26th. And that's our general meeting for conducting business with the general membership. And so if you're a TAPR member, please try to attend.
What was that date again, Dave?
It's October 26th, and it's 3:00 for me. It's 4:00 Eastern.
Okay, thanks.
Comment that does conflict with the AMSAT general meeting, Tampa, Florida. Just so you know.
I am sorry.
For anybody who's a member of both organizations.
That was set by Stana. So we were in kind of flux this last month.
Okay.
So, but the voting will not be conducted at the Zoom. You will have a couple of weeks after the meeting to vote by email. So just a little TAPR business, since we're affiliated with, this meeting is affiliated with TAPR. So general discussion.
Where do we stand on what we've been calling the reference antenna? There was some discussion on Rob's meeting a couple days later. And I was wondering, Rob, has kind of the definition of the word reference, has that been
I don't know
clarified?
that I don't know that reference is a good term, but and it's not intended. What we're trying to find is an antenna that we could, that could be used by the average HamSCI grape site, and that would be to the extent possible, which is limited, of course, would be available to all of those sites. And I confess I've been so overwhelmed with other tasks that I haven't invested a whole lot of energy in the antenna, a part of it. But I can show you, I mean, we do have, as a candidate, there's a couple of antennas that, several, I've enlisted Uli, who is in Belgium, so he can't join us. But Uli has been doing some comparison work at his site of Glenn N6GN's active antenna, or active vertical dipole. And Glenn himself has a couple of sites up where he's recording two antennas, a loop on Earth, as he describes it, and one of his active antennas, one of the big ones, the 5-meter ones. And
can I ask a question before we get into the antenna comparisons of
yeah.
Nathaniel?
Yeah.
Nathaniel, this whole idea of a reference antenna or standard antenna, some of the discussions, Paul mentioned that there was a discussion last Wednesday on the Whisper Demon user group, Zoom or Google Meet, about just that definition of terms and what the objective is. Is there a scientific reason for having a standard / reference / whatever you want to call it antenna to be deployed at each of the sites that you have in mind? Or is that standard antenna really primarily practical as a device that you can support and is fairly simple to install and that kind of thing?
I mean,
because go ahead.
Ideally, both, I guess. But I guess from a scientific perspective, it'd be nice, it'd be ideal to have a uniform set of hardware at each of these reference sites that we know what the antenna characteristics are. Even if it's not perfect, we know we can go back to that. We can be like, okay, these all have the same antennas with known characteristics. They have the same set of receive hardware, and allegedly, if you receive a particular transmitter at one of these stations and you compare it with another, with what you receive from the transmitter from that same transmitter at another station that's also a reference station, then the only variables are the ionosphere and the propagation in between, not the hardware. So that'd be the main goal. And then we would like it to be relatively deployable and supportable, because we would like, in addition to these reference stations, as many people to adopt this as possible. And, some people do, of course, have more money and larger properties, but that's not everybody. So if we could get something that's somewhat modest, that would be great. I think, of course, realize that all of these are kind of competing requirements. If you say it's not reasonable to say you want a high performance, small broadband HF antenna. That's just not reasonable. That doesn't cost anything. It doesn't work. So that's why I'm hoping this group might present a number of different options that might say, okay, this one's a little bit more money, but it performs better. This one's a little bit less, doesn't perform quite as well. Maybe we have a few different options and we can kind of weigh where we really do want to compromise and what's practical. And maybe it turns out that we do end up picking, you know, 2 or 3 different designs that we say, okay, depending on the situation, if you have a little bit more money or a little bit more land, you put up this one. If you have, you know, if you have less money, less land, you put up that one. But then there are still known quantities.
Well,
I would
along those
also
lines, I was suggesting, I mean, I was thinking that to a degree, we're competing against our natural tendency to try and optimize our antennas. And a lot of the discussions that we've been having about this antenna actually have included just exactly that issue to a degree that almost makes you have to stop for a second and kind of reel it back and say, well, but what we're really trying to do is have a standard antenna. Maybe the alternative is to, or some other additional guidance would be to those people who do want to tweak their antenna, constantly be trying to improve their antenna and so on, how that fits into answering the scientific questions. If you're going to break the answer to some science because you want to screw around with your antenna, then maybe you should think twice, or
I think
that
the
we could have some
philosophy,
guidance about what to do.
I mean, my guiding philosophy with HamSCI has always been, you know, people who buy their own equipment and want to do their own thing, they are, you know, they're free to do what they want to do. You know, well, of course, if they're contributing and they can contribute data to the network, it's just that it's flagged in such a way that we realize that that data is, you know, a slightly different set of hardware. So I think there's room in the metadata for the system to say like what type of antenna you have and have some sort of antenna description. So people who do want to set up their own, I think can do that.
But what that means is that your data may not be included in the papers and things that are written. Because I
Well,
think there
maybe
tends to be a tendency to want to work with the stations that were
not.
sponsored or paid for potentially.
Well, no, there's no necessarily a tendency to want to work with the data that's sponsored or paid for here. The tendency, at least what I've really been pushing, is for people to look at the data that answers the science question. So if the data is in the database and if it appropriately answers whatever question we're looking at, then we're going to include it.
Remember
And then
that
another comment on the antenna issue that Michael was talking about, you could have like what I'll call a calibration day, where everybody's listening to the same set of signals, and then you have some sort of benchmark. And that's what we do in astronomy, for instance. You move off your target and move back on your target.
Yeah. And maybe we do something like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see what, you know, recommended antennas come out of this. The other nice thing is, for the most part, with this project, we've been relying on things that have not necessarily required careful calibration of like antenna values. You know, we've done things where we're relying on the frequency precision of the GPSDO, or we rely on, you know, we understand that the amplitudes are very noisy, and we use analysis techniques that are resilient to uncalibrated amplitudes. You can do things where you say, okay, we believe at least this particular station is consistent with itself, and so again, just use relative amplitudes. So there's a lot of ways to look at the data and get useful information out of it, even if it isn't totally calibrated.
we're also, I think we're also fooling ourselves if we think, and we probably don't, but if we think that a standard, you know, calibrated or at least identical antenna is going to behave identically at all locations. There are going to be tens of dB difference in antenna gain and pattern based on the ground, you know,
well, here's a much,
conductivity, and then the signal to noise ratio is going to vary so much depending on site location.
Here's a much
EMI,
more
whatever.
practical way to look at the problem. At the end of the day, we have to field between 20 to 30 stations for the grant. And so, and we are going to be shipping antennas to 20 to 30 people. We need to have an antenna design that we're like, here, this is going to work.
And
So-
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Is that, you got to focus on what's important to the project.
Yeah.
And I think that actual calibration of the antenna gain is way, way down on the list.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And
Okay.
I absolutely agree with that. And similarly, people always come up to me and they ask, okay, they say, I want to install a personal space weather station. What kind of hardware do I need? And they want to know, what kind of antenna do I have? Do I need to get? And I just want to be able to go, hey, go to this website. Here's like option A, B, C, pick one that works for you. And then and if you want to get into more detail beyond that, then go to talk to people who are really antenna enthusiasts. But just like,
Yeah,
I
one
would
from
also
column
like
A,
to-
one from column B, I
I would
agree.
also like to recommend that some of us that are not hardware or money constrained, like some of the set up 2 radios at a common site with different antennas and report them separately.
I should also make a note that I think absolutely 0 of the papers that I have published have ever relied on data from radio science instruments with
Yes.
carefully calibrated antennas. Absolutely none of them. The super darn radars are absolutely horrific in terms of having calibrated like patterns, and but you can still get useful information out of it. All my super darn papers, all my RBN PSK reporter papers, I've gotten lots of good mileage out of not really knowing what the antenna was.
Which is why I really, really like working in the frequency or the time domain rather than the amplitude domain.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But with all that said, I think it is a useful exercise to spend a few minutes to kind of evaluate what the options are and come up with some sort of general recommendation that says, okay, for between $100 to $300, here's something that is workable. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to just like, I don't know, you don't want to, we can't tell everyone, oh, go put up like a 2-meter vertical. That's not going to work. So
But people will appreciate having a starting point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want to have people put up a coat hanger. So
And honestly, like I don't I often point to the DX Engineering, the RF Pro 1B, but I point to it because it's convenient. It's broadband 0.5 megahertz to 30 megahertz. It's very modest size, so it's easy to install. But gosh darn it, that thing is expensive. It's like $700, $800. It used to be $500, and that was expensive then. And now like $800 for that thing. And then it has some nulls in it, and some people were talking about its durability. Is there I feel like we should find some antenna that's a little more
I think
affordable.
if we can get one of Glenn's antenna projects basically manufacturable, I think that has a lot of promise as far as an inexpensive, deployable, and well-performing antenna. Rob's going to know more about that, but I think there's hope. But that also depends on schedule and will require some effort. The other approach is just find something that's already being manufactured that you can buy, and we'd pick something that doesn't suck too badly, isn't too expensive, and
is environmentally rugged and all
good.
that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, it has to be green.
Well, I like the idea of column A, column B, column C kind of thing too, because there'll be people who know up front, I can put up a vertical antenna, no problem, but a dipole is going to be a problem, or vice versa. And or a loop for that matter, as Dave McGaw was talking about. So if we were able to make some solid recommendations in each of those three categories that suited the bill. That would be probably beneficial to people as they're asking or volunteering to be a site, but don't want to misrepresent what they're capable of doing with respect to putting up an antenna.
I was going to create. I'm just in the process on the side here creating a Google or a Groups.io group, so that we could those of us who are interested in this antenna part of this could communicate through that mechanism about our interests and activities, and take it off of the larger group for whom maybe this process would be a lot of noise. Um, I have been working with Glenn, and I'm trying to going through the process of ordering some of his field probes, which are uh, which are an active antenna. That's an active antenna design, but not one that's suitable for deployment long term. It's for finding a good location on your site. But anyway, I was going to create that. I know Joe Hobart, I think, who is, I'm not sure if he's here, had expressed an interest in this process. I know David is interested, you, and so on. So I thought perhaps if we communicate in that forum, and maybe we have a separate meeting that on the subject, we could come up with a process. We have Uli in Belgium, who is put up, has a comparison site so we can look at. Glenn himself has a comparison where he's running his active dipole and a loop on Earth, loop on ground, as two candidates that we might consider or offer. I don't know that. I think that some of us have already expressed that there's not going to be one solution for everybody. Everyone's receive location in their homes and exit. I can't put up an antenna here at all. I'm in a townhouse, so I'm not a candidate as a receive site. But even those of you who have have backyards and so on have constraints, physical constraints about what you can put up. And then there's the other dimensions of, the local interference and so on. So I think that we'd probably likely to come up with, several alternative antennas that that we could use, and hopefully we can document what antenna is used along with the reports that we make about when we upload data reports. It would be I think is there space in the personal weather station database for the antenna type that's in use. I think that would be a piece of information that ought to be included. One could ignore it, as you have done, Nathaniel, but I think it's also can be informative.
Yeah,
to
I
include
think
that.
I think there is, and I believe there is in the station description, and the digital RF format additionally does have the ability to put like sample by sample metadata in.
Yeah.
So if we needed something more robust than what's already there, there are ways to do that.
Okay. Well, in any case, if I was creating this groups IO forum that where we could communicate about this subject, that would be perhaps, unless you feel like this is appropriate, just put in the general forum. But I worry that we'd be generating a lot of antenna noise in a larger group that may not be so interested in it. They're
Yeah,
gonna
I think that my opinion, I think for now is yeah, create like some sort of secondary forum for antennas, and you can advertise that forum on the HamSCI list to be like, hey, anyone who wants to be a part of this antenna discussion, please go here.
Okay, I was just going to call it HamSCI Antenna Project.
Yeah.
And
if you need to get the word out to the HamSCI list or get it posted on the website, you can work with Gary. Gary can
Yeah.
help you
Okay.
form that group
Okay.
and do what
Well,
needs to be done there.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
that was what I was working on in parallel to this discussion. So it's
That sounds wonderful.
okay. And we do have, as I say, we do have a number of sites that are already allow us to do comparisons. If you're interested, I could, I could show the group an example of, I mean, using Whisper spot counts, I think is a good metric for the quality of the of the antenna, or comparison for antennas for the HamSCI purposes. So if you were to if you want it as an example of what you can see. Oh, wait a second. I'm on a new computer and I can't share things. I'm sorry. Oh, wait a second. Let's see if it'll I've switched computers and um I can't share. Okay. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I can share. I have to all this permission stuff in the world we have. Okay, let's see if is this going to Zoom going to refresh? Let me try again. It's doing there all kinds of refreshing is going on, so it's well, let me see if I can let's see if that happens again. Yeah, now I can share. Here's an example of a comparison. Okay. So this is a vertical dipole, the active antenna, Glenn's active antenna, compared against the loop on the ground in his backyard in well, he's in Fort Collins. So you can see that this is 24-hour spot count. And the N3, the red line, is the vertical dipole, active vertical dipole. That's a 5.5 meter active vertical dipole. And the blue line is the loop on the ground, loop on the earth, which also has an active antenna, active amplifier on it. So you can see that if you look up here, just as a gross metric, I use up here in the, I don't know if I can, I can't highlight it up here. You can see that the active antenna received 10,728 spots over 24 hours, and the loop on the earth received only 10,059. So I'm not sure that's even statistically significant, but it's an indication of how you can go about comparing antennas at one site. Now his site is, the other sites are different, but and for some people, perhaps the loop on the earth is an easier thing to install than a 20 foot tall vertical whip in the backyard. But those are
I've also seen things where people will try to measure the pattern of their receive antenna by looking at the azimuths at which the signals are coming in.
we could go and look at that. That's available through the you can look at the pattern, compare patterns between these two antennas. But I think that one of our criteria is we do want to have pretty much an omnidirectional antenna. I mean, if we're going to go for directional antennas, then clearly a directional antenna, or a group of directional antennas can do a better job than an omni. An omni suffers, and Uli made this point to me quite graphically in an email earlier today, comparing his he has one of Glenn's active verticals, which works extremely well for him, but doesn't work as well as some of his directional receive antennas. I mean, but those only work well in certain directions, of course. But if you can afford to have, 4 directional antennas, receive antennas, well, you're going to do better than you're going to do on an omni. But I think that for this project, the receive antenna project, I think that one of the things we could stakes in the ground should be it ought to be omnidirectional. Now, even the vertical has the problem that, of course, it doesn't receive vertical. It has a null going vertically. So you will get at times certain bands and times a day, you will get more spots on some bands from a horizontal antenna than you will from a vertical.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if we start broadening the criteria beyond Omni, we now open a whole can of worms. It's just
Right.
too hard a project. So I think if we limit ourselves to studying alternatives for omnidirectional antennas, uh, for whisper and for grape sites, that I think that helps limit the number of candidates that we'd consider. The loop on the Earth is one. The vertical, whether it's a E-field probe, unbalanced kind of E-field probes, or a vertical dipole. All of those are inherently
I don't
omnidirectional.
think you want to eliminate the small loop.
Or small loops.
But
No, I
that's not,
don't. No,
but
no,
that
yeah,
doesn't meet your criterion because it's not
you're
Omni.
right.
So
you're
maybe
right.
maybe Omni or near Omni.
Yeah.
It's like the small loops
Not a
have,
beam, in other words.
have like
no, you're quite right,
sharp
David. We should,
nulls, but
yeah,
but
the Omni.
maybe if still be effective.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. You're right. The Omnis and there's a lot of Omnis available. I mean, a lot of people make them. It's commercially. I don't think we need to invent one there. I'm not sure that in terms of verticals that there are the one that I have. Does anyone have one of those DX engineering verticals that you were showing, Nathaniel? Because it would be good to use it. Let's start with if someone can suggest something that's commercially available, then we should consider it, of course. Not invent our own.
We had a couple running at Jenny Jump when I was at NJIT, and
Yeah.
they may still be there, but I'm not sure
Well,
how good of a condition they're in.
Weren't those the dipoles? Active
No,
amplified
they were
dipoles? If I remember, there were cross dipoles there.
Well, Ethan has cross dipoles there.
Oh, okay.
But we also put in some active, just the verticals.
Gotcha.
Okay, here's my
we had both.
question. Does it matter really for the science that you're doing if your antenna is omni or horizontal dipole or whatever? Yeah, some antennas will receive better in some directions rather than others. Some will do better with NVIS and others, horizontally polarized, vertically polarized. But regardless of the type of antenna, as long as it, picks up a reasonable number of signals, does that give you what you need for the science you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it probably will.
So, I mean,
for instance, if you're
I
just
like
picking up,
recommendations.
Yeah,
I think recommending, what we were calling the reference antenna, or, here's an antenna that we know will work, and here's another one that we know will work pretty well. And that's great, but I think it seems to me that we don't want to put a lot of restrictions on the type of antenna if that would otherwise keep somebody from putting a station on the air.
Oh, I completely agree with that. Yes.
Okay.
we might have recommendations for orientation.
Yeah, of course.
But like if you're doing an antenna that's going to be picking up predominantly WWV, they'll all be coming from the same direction, presumably. And you could put the null in the opposite 90 degrees from that.
Yeah, and if, WWV is a huge part of this, but if we're talking about whisper, there's signals coming from all over the place.
Yeah, correct. The other problem is that, with the WWV as it's being done now, using wire antennas, the pattern gets very squirrely at the higher bands, higher frequencies.
Yeah,
if you're using a single wire antenna.
For a long, relatively long multi-band antenna, you get all sorts of lobes on the thing at the higher frequencies, obvious. So, what do we need to accomplish with this antenna?
Again, the important thing right now is we have to have if we're going to be sending out 20, 25 of these stations, we have to have an antenna that works reasonably well that we can afford and that people can install.
And what are the primary signals, Nathaniel? Is this predominantly WWV or is it a whisper station or what?
It's going to be WWV, CHU, whisper. So it really ideally it should be Omni. It should be an isotropic radiator that works equally well on all frequencies from half a megahertz up through 30 megahertz.
No, but it's mainly going to be used as a receive antenna, isn't that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is not a transmit antenna.
Yeah, so the concept of it being an active antenna may not be so important, because an active antenna, maybe you would be setting it for the frequency you want to transmit on.
The active antenna is covered. No, the active antenna.
No, you're misunderstanding an active antenna.
Yeah.
And it should, whatever antenna system we choose we would want it to play reasonably well with someone who has an active ham radio station too. That's something to consider.
Yeah, so that's a dynamic range sort of thing, but
the active antenna is
receive only that we're talking.
Simply means we've probably got a preamplifier on it. That's what we mean by an active antenna, as opposed to just a passive receiver.
And that preamplifier is trying to work into the a high impedance of an unmatched non-resonant antenna.
Or a low impedance in the case of a loop.
Okay, but work over a broad range of impedances then.
Well, actually, it doesn't. Well, for a loop, you usually use low impedance from 50 ohms down to 0, effectively.
I was thinking of the short
vertical an E-field antenna, like the vertical dipole or just a vertical whip.
Yeah,
that's a very high impedance antenna. It's a different preamp.
Right. That's what I was thinking of. Okay.
Yeah, I will say one thing that's nice about the loop, small loop with a finite input impedance, is that you can actually, as I had mentioned before, can quite easily notch an offending local signal, like your AM broadcast station.
And you can filter out the FM stations too. So.
Yes.
Okay.
So Rob, are you setting up this?
Yeah, I'm setting it up. Yeah,
Okay.
I will create it, and you'll get emails later with some of you. If you don't receive an email, Gary, maybe I'll I'll include you in this, so you're aware of the group and can publicize it more widely. So. So anyway, that's
antenna business for the day, I think. I hope.
I don't think that we should go to. I think that the goals, I think, are the important part for the first stage. What are we trying to achieve here? And then we can come up with. I think it's right to consider several alternatives and options for sites. So. And of course, there's a deadline, right? When do you want to start shipping such things out? What's the plan to start deployment?
So I think the goal is going to be probably by the beginning of next summer, we want to be shipping things out, because right now we're doing our gathering information about the antenna phase, and then we want Gary to work on assembling the list of stations, and then we'll actually start buying stuff in the springtime, and then we want to have get a student at Scranton and to work with Majid and Jonathan Rizzo and myself to actually get the stuff shipped out starting over the summer. Of course, if we can start shipping stuff earlier, great. But I would say that's a very reasonable timeline.
And remember, we're talking about an HF, a VLF, and the ground magnetometer. So whether we do it all at once or do it piecemeal, we'll just have to see, I think.
Yes. But certainly knowing what the equipment's going to look like that we're sending out is going to be an important part of getting it all put together.
But there will be people like myself who already has a magnetometer and already has an HF station to a certain extent.
Right, right. And
that
we'll
just
take all
may
of that
need to
into
add
consider.
something. Yeah,
We will take all of that into consideration too.
just increases the number of stations that you have in total potentially.
Yep. Yeah, the way we wrote the grant for this one was we said we'd have 25, 30 stations that have a magnetometer, HF instrument, and VLF instrument all at the same site. And so that's what our goal for this project is. So whether that means upgrading current sites to have kind of all have the same equipment, or if it means creating entirely new sites, that the main goal is to have to make the sites that are funded by the grant have all three instruments co-located.
But it also creates a scenario where once you've defined this station that you're going to send out, someone that like me that doesn't necessarily want to take that station from you or take away from your total count.
Right.
Maybe I need to add 2 more receive channels that I'm not receiving now, or 3 more.
Yes.
Something that I'm not doing. So once you're defined, then it sort of sets a model that other people need to.
That's absolutely true. Yes. So once we do have this defined, we want to have it set so that other people who do want to run these things can self-fund their own stations. And we want to make sure that the parts are available for people who want to do that and the instructions.
Well, and the criteria. It
Well, yeah,
would seem to me that there's sort of a common set of principles that would govern the construction of the sets or the stations, whether they're the grant funded sort of package stations or whether it's a grow your own station like Bob's talking about and like a lot of us have sort of constructed.
Yes.
The whole idea, I shouldn't say it, the piggyback of all the RX 888 data onto the original grape model is an exact illustration of the problem or the opportunity here for making a definition which actually subsumes both types of arrangement and any others. There's old but perfectly and actually excellent radios in the open HBSDR model that could be used on a couple of frequencies at a time. They're not capable of getting the whole 30 megahertz bandwidth, but they're beautiful radios. They're frequency stabilized. We don't quite yet have the pathway easily to integrate them into Whisper Demon or K9Q radio, but it's conceivable that might occur. There's the SDR play radios that are frequency stabilized. There's the Air Spies, and so on and so forth, all of which could be contributing the data, but use a variety of underlying hardware implementation.
I
But
completely agree with that.
We need to know
the criteria. Yes.
Yeah.
And earlier I said, I used the word calibration, and maybe I shouldn't have said calibration, but there needs to be a situation where once people have their station running, their data can be qualified to be providing the information that's needed for the science effort, so that you don't do all this work and in the end find out your data is not going to be used because you didn't quite achieve this particular goal that we need.
That's right. So the new grant includes a new position called the Chief Operations Scientist, and that's going to fund Christina Collins to hold that position. So I would see that like data quality and management falling under kind of her oversight. And she's supposed to work with the University of Alabama and their software team to develop tools to help her do that job and help people make sure their stations are providing quality data.
Well, that also means having some well-defined metadata that we can share regarding, I mean, among the specifics we'd already discussed were the characteristics of the antenna. What are the salient characteristics of the antenna that you want to make sure you include as you're uploading the data pertinent to it?
Yeah.
But if it turns out that there's something important about the radio you're using, or some other feature of the antenna system, plus or minus LNA, plus or minus filtering, that sort of stuff, that whole overarching data model, independent of what your hardware implementation is, but obviously then acknowledging what your hardware implementation is, would be pretty useful.
And one
Yeah.
thing else I wanted to bring up was to ask Rob to comment on, last week we talked about installing Linux, and you were recommending Linux server over a Linux desktop, I believe. And I just wondered, what is it about the server implementation that drove you to want to go that direction or make that better?
It's
Okay, well,
smaller. That's the main thing.
What did you say?
And
Jim?
snaps.
It's a lot
server
smaller,
implementation.
and it doesn't have a lot of desktop crap installed in it.
the desktop environment includes a auto software upgrade service called Snap, and the Snap service that's part of Ubuntu Linux goes in and can on its own upgrade the software on your desktop. Sometimes it will prompt you if you're a desktop environment, it will prompt you and ask you to do that and and then go into various failure modes. So if you have a Linux server that is headless, especially, or one that you rarely look at the desktop of, okay, it's very possible, and I've encountered it several times, that your server, they can install new versions of software that corrupt your operating system environment. I had this occur to me at KPH, where I had the desktop version installed, and then about a month later, suddenly I lost the Ethernet interface, the physical interface that's on the server itself, became unstable. It would reconnect every 2 or 3 minutes, and and as far as we could tell, that was due to a change that some piece of software installed by Snap went in and upgraded the drivers to a broken version of the driver for that particular Ethernet interface. So for scientific investigations, I think we want to keep for me, that was really, it made it almost impossible to use the server since it's so distant to me physically. I couldn't go back and fix it for several weeks. And but in general, I think that when you're doing scientific investigations, you want to keep your measurement instruments in general well calibrated and unchanging. And it's difficult to do that with the desktop version of Ubuntu.
Why don't you switch to a Debian distro?
There's a wider range of distros. Yes, I mean, Whisper Daemon does support Debian 12. But Debian isn't as integrated with every piece of software. If you have to Ubuntu is the most widely available and best supported of the distros. It has its problems because it tries to satisfy a lot of user requirements, but the server version is so far has been quite stable. And,
Yeah,
Ubuntu is just a dialect of Debian. It is Debian. It just has more cruft later on top. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's trying to run like Windows. But the reason why I asked about Debian is I at least understand that Debian doesn't have Snap, which is sounds like that's the biggest issue, but it
Well,
sounds like there's
Ubuntu
other
server,
You can
issues
take
as well.
Ubuntu
Snap off of it.
server can install without Snap. Ubuntu
Yeah.
server can install
Yeah.
without Snap.
yeah, it
But
it installs with when you do an Ubuntu server, it doesn't install Snap. The Snap service isn't active.
Well, it's there. It's available. There's a whole list of stuff that you can as
You
an
can,
option
but yeah, but
install
it
it
hasn't
now.
it hasn't installed, but not that there are no services that are being maintained by Snap in the Ubuntu server. But you
They're
know, if
also
you want to,
rolling
if you
out,
want
they're rolling out another version too right now, I think. So
of
that
what?
could change up in Ubuntu. The
Well,
server.
the 2404 has just LTS has just been released in April.
Right.
So of course they're on to the next version, but that'll be several years before it becomes available. I have 20 plus Whisper Daemon sites running Ubuntu 24 now, and server, and it's been a very easy, reliable, and stable installation. So if you want to install Debian 12, be my guest. And Whisper Daemon, the last time I did it, I think that Phil has some servers running Debian 12, and um, Whisper Daemon runs that on that. But every distro has its challenges. So it's
That's
you know,
right.
it's one of the least rewarding tasks for me as a software developer is the distribution and installation stage, which I've been going through for the past few weeks, and finding different people having different versions of different OSs, and then having to figure out what libraries were missing. What, some distros include CMake, some include Git, some don't. It's a Tower of Babel even within the Linux world. So I don't know. Most people I know have been using Ubuntu, so I said, okay, Ubuntu 24, 22, or 24, I'll support it, and the server version. Well, it'll run. Of course, I run on the desktop version too, but I encourage people to go to server. So
I'm gonna head on out.
okay,
Nice talking with everybody, and see you around.
okay, Paul, take care.
See ya.
But
Scott Newell asked a question in the chat, and you can de-snap a machine. Clint has prepared some guidance for that, and if you do a Google search on it, you can see how to do it as well.
Yeah, if you install Whisper Daemon this afternoon, I checked in. I wrote a function, a bash function, wd-dsnap, and it goes through and does it for you. So I basically follow what Clint's suggestions are on his webpage. So if you're a Whisper Daemon user, or you can just type wd-dsnap and it'll get rid of it all. So, but you don't need to do it really on a server if you've done a server install. If you've done if you have a desktop install of Ubuntu, then you really do need to.
That's the bottom line is if you're going to try to run this stuff on a just sort of Linux machine that is running desktop that you are going to put into service, you just have to beware. If you want to build one from scratch, build it with Ubuntu server. You don't have to go through the dsnap process, and either one of them will work. I mean, practically speaking, there's just some of these gotchas that we've been lamenting that bite you on the various installations.
Anyway, Michael, you might do a get pull and try my wd-dsnap if you need it someplace. So
I've desnapped all my machines already.
I know yours are probably all dsnap, but if I've been going through and now I realize I can easily go and check them out as I do installations and upgrades.
But if someone's running it on a machine that they use as a desktop machine, though, then there are some snaps that Ubuntu offers, and you can reinstall it. So you just have to know that that's the issue. I mean, the first question was, why can't I use Ubuntu desktop? Well, it's because of snaps. And so if you really intend to use an Ubuntu desktop that has snaps all installed and everything, you either have to really think that through carefully and realize it's going to potentially expose you to some problems, or pick a different machine where you install the OS without snap. And then be prepared in future if it wants to install snaps to resist the temptation to do what Ubuntu wants you to do.
You can virtually always install the sub-elements without snap. They exist often as a snap and a non-snap version as well. There's something I particularly like to use that by default is installed on Ubuntu with a snap, and I desnapped mine and that facility went away, but I just reinstalled it without a snap, because what snap is about packaging, just like flat packs and other things. It's about trying to keep the distributions from stomping all over each other, or the components. But you can in Linux Mint, they don't use snaps, but they use flat packs. And in the graphical installer for packages, there's option to use often either a flat pack version or what they call a system version, which means the good old fashioned way. Just use it just gets it you with apt-get. So just a thought.
Yeah, the trouble is Ubuntu is trying to shove this down everybody's throat.
Yeah,
really routine programs like Firefox are distributed as snaps. And if you suddenly you're using a desktop and Firefox is your main browser, you've got to desnap your machine, which means Firefox goes away. And then you have to know not to install Firefox as a snap again, because if it does so, it's going to
There's
install
a
all
simple
the.
solution to all this. Just back out of Ubuntu and use Debian.
Well, a lot of
I'm
people are
serious.
going to
That's what I do. I do not run Ubuntu on anything.
I
run
honestly would do the same.
A lot of the
But I
people are going
understand
to
that
be using
Rob has a
Raspberry
lot
Pi too.
invested.
You got to be able to work with Raspberry Pis also.
Yeah, Raspberry Pi is Debian, not Ubuntu.
Well, there's an Ubuntu for Raspberry Pi as well.
There is, but the standard Raspberry Pi distribution is not Ubuntu. It is simply a Raspberry Pi flavor version of Debian.
I'm just going
to Ubuntu is its own flavor of Debian, but they've gone off and done all these weird Ubuntu specific things, like the snap problem you're complaining about.
I'm just gonna break in here for a minute. I'm gonna jump into a breakout room with Jamal. So I will see everyone later, and 7-3.
Same
Yeah,
thing.
I don't use Snap either. I took it off.
So why not just back out the Debian?
That's what I started out with, was Ubuntu, and I was using Wine to run Windows programs and all of that. And I had someone else who he was big into Linux and all that, and he told me to get into just plain Debian, which, just like Phil said, is built off or not Debian, but Ubuntu is built off of Debian, so it's a much more I guess not basic but original version than Ubuntu, and it's a proper system compared to Ubuntu. Ubuntu is trying to operate more like a desktop, like Windows, whereas Debian is its own thing pretty much.
Yeah, especially if you were running on a turnkey box, it's headless, like a server that's running our programs.
Yeah. And that's the main reason why I asked that. Debian is just a little more open
Mainstream.
when it, yeah. I was going to use open at least for in terms of
Well, it is the mainstream. I
abilities.
mean, it's the common element to both the Raspberry Pi and Ubuntu, right? I mean, they're both based on Debian. So if you back up the
Yeah.
Debian, you're much more likely to have things port over to both Ubuntu and the Raspberry Pi.
And I'm pretty sure Debian has more support anyways than Ubuntu, because not as much of the software programmers are into Ubuntu as much as Debian.
Yeah,
What
remember,
ends up
Debian is
happening,
mainstream.
I'm not sure about the support issue. I've never been burned by Ubuntu server.
I haven't either.
It's just it's close enough to Debian
Well,
that
Ubuntu server is just Ubuntu desktop without a lot of the crap that Ubuntu adds.
Yeah, it's the server I
Right.
can understand.
It's got enough of the stuff removed that the stuff that's burning us is largely the stuff that's the desktop crap.
That is what Ubuntu adds. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what Debian doesn't have, is all the desktop stuff. It's much more basic.
Well, what a project like this does, though, is we will evolve along, and he'll have 30 people that he wants to bring up, send it out. Everybody's got to install a computer and an OS. And inevitably, what happens is you build a script to try to install everything they need. And so everybody needs to be looking at the same thing, or else the scripts get complex between different OSs.
Right.
And then as the update thing becomes an issue, the best thing to do there is don't do updates once the project is running, if the computer is dedicated to this project.
Yeah, but that's not practical, Bob. I mean, you have to do system updates, right? I mean, eventually, and there are security poles that have to be patched and stuff like that. You got to do it. So
yeah, well, then they bring on like Python changes and
oh God,
other kinds
Python,
of
don't
changes
get me
that all
started.
ripple out into your stuff, and you're constantly, it becomes a lifelong thing to just try to debug all your computer problems.
I know. Well, one thing that's becoming more and more practical is just tell the user, look, I mean, just get another Pi and dedicate it to this application and run whatever it needs, right? Serious.
Well, the Pi is not up to this task anymore, but yeah, having a dedicated
Pi 5 maybe.
Not even a Pi 5. It's
No,
certainly not.
The
It's
Pi,
not a
Pi 5 won't run Whisper Daemon, but it will run K9Q.
Well, sure.
Barely. It'll run K9Q, but it with a RX
And then the
AAA.
K9Q on Pi can feed Whisper Daemon running on another machine.
That's
Yeah,
right.
then why? So you have two machines. Why not just get the other machine that runs Whisper
Well,
Daemon?
look, Rob, this is exactly why I wrote K9Q Radio the way I did, is so you didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Precisely, right? I mean, I know you're trying to save, you're trying to economize everywhere, but there were limits. And there's a definite advantage in having one machine that's dedicated to each or customized to each application. So you don't have these hassles of having to.
I agree. What do you? I think that the best thing is to pick dedicate a B-Link to your reception.
Okay. I mean, what does it say when I can run, 50 1.2 million point FFTs every second on a Raspberry Pi and do all the other stuff K9Q Radio does, and it's not, that same machine is not fast enough for Whisper Daemon? What does that say?
Well, hey, Whisper Daemon itself doesn't the problem is the Whisper D decoder. Go talk to
okay. What does it say about Whisper D? I mean,
well, it's okay. You want to go?
Something wrong there.
You want to go work on Whisper D? That'd be great.
I have looked at it. I've been fighting the temptation for a long time.
Please help us, Phil. This is you're the Whisper. What if you look at a Whisper Daemon site? It's not all of my 10,000, 15,000 lines of bash is invisible. You don't see it running at
Okay,
all.
fair
All
enough,
you see,
fair enough,
all you see is your code,
fair
okay?
enough.
Radio D running, and you see, and you see the Whisper D recording
Yeah,
fire
fair
up
enough.
every 2 minutes. Okay,
Yeah,
so
and then when you add FD4 and FT8, it's hardly anything.
FD4 and 8 are almost invisible. You can see them
right.
actually. There's a little bit of 4 and 8 stuff in there, but
Right.
it's but
Even
what
though they run
dominate what
what, 8 times as often.
yeah, they offer you
Times
can
as
see the
often.
you can if you look at the strip chart of a Whisper
No,
Demon site,
right.
which I can you will see that you'll see a kind of characteristic sawtooth pattern to the to the strip chart of the CPU utilization, and it's every 2 minutes it fires up and it runs the Whisper Demon runs Whisper D, and it chews up 40 cores at KFS because there's 40 channels. There's more than
Yeah.
40 channels, so they all run in parallel until they're done. But the I'd love to get everybody off of Whisper mode transmissions and move to 4W, so we could use the much more CPU efficient modulation technique in decoding. But that's just not going to happen if we're going to,
What does 4W use? I don't actually know these other modes. What's the modulation? What's the coding?
I don't understand the difference, Phil. This is your area of expertise.
When I
not
talked
mine.
to Steve Frankie, he told me actually, I thought that it was, my sequential decoder that was responsible for a lot of the CPU and Whisper D. And he says, no, actually, it's some of the other stuff that they have in there, which surprised me. So I have to, if I had time, I had to dig into that and find out exactly what he's talking about. What are those other things? And why don't they show up in programs like FT4 and FT8?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's an example. Here's what this is. Let's see if I can share a screen here. This is this is at KFS. The top, there's the strip chart at the top. Oops.
Right.
Okay. And you can see right at this moment, well, it's almost done. We're at near the end of a Whisper cycle. So that's most of the decodes are finished, but you can see the decoders are still running. You can see that some of these run it can take almost 2 minutes to run on a core. So and all of this is due to the Whisper D decoder. So
you say you recompiled it a little while ago and it ran faster, or was
we did recompile. Michael recompiled it, and we found you're going to see we're up at second 5 of a Whisper cycle, and you can see all 40 cores are busy now, 100%. That's a 40 core dual CPU Xeon, and you've got 40 cores, 100% busy. And you can see what's
how many channels is this? Because I don't see that here.
There's 4 antennas, each of which has 15
okay, you got
bands
4 antennas. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So that's why there's so many channels
Okay,
here.
one machine for all antennas. Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
this is the.
Of course, you don't have to do that. Everything's modular here.
I'm actually in parallel on each of the antennas has a Whisper 888 on it, and it is running in parallel these decodes. If we went over and looked at a B-link in parallel, we would SSR Omni. Here's the Omni antenna. Okay, and
it's just duplicate work for testing reasons.
I'm sorry.
You say in parallel. You mean it's duplicating the work for test purposes?
Yes, so it gets logged up. So they get logged up separately, so we can look at the plots from each of the four
I got it.
antennas
I got it. Yeah.
individually, as well as coalescing all of them into one report up to WhisperNet. So I
Got
was
it.
showing you the one report up to WhisperNet, but there's also 4 individual reports for each of the 4 antennas.
All right.
So so you have you have the CPU. It would be great if we could get off of Whisper and get
Yeah.
onto only 4W, but there's only a few 4W transmitters in the world.
Yeah, or improve Whisper D if it were possible. If it is
If you
possible.
could, if you could improve Whisper D decoding, that would be a
Okay,
great.
but Michael, you say you recompile Whisper D and it got faster just from recompilation?
Believe it or not, yeah, but the comparison was between recompiling for, I think I did it for Ubuntu 2204, Ubuntu 2404, and Raspbian, and compared with the APT installable from WSJT X from the basic distro. So you can install the binary directly, but downloading the code and building it on your operating system probably speeds things up by a factor of 2 or so.
No,
Maybe a little
that's
bit
certainly
more.
worth it.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's what
I did that for
We
the
don't know.
several
We
things,
don't
and
know
that's
what
what
options
Rob
were
just
used to build that binary. That's distributed
No.
by, right?
Yeah.
do not
Yeah.
know.
Well, yeah.
You
So
have to know
when
what C compiler you're using too.
Z compiler, what optimization options, profiling, all that kind of stuff.
I didn't
So
do
that-
anything fancy at all. I just built it. Well, I did build it with the patch that would distribute it. What's his name, Rob, that made that patch? I can't remember.
Ryan Tolboon, he's at Ryan is at New Jersey Institute of Technology
So
instructor.
I built the binary just out of the box, the WSJT targ zip, and then applied the patch that Ryan created to do things more efficiently. And those 2 binaries are the ones that I built.
You know what that patch did? The nature
No,
of the patch.
not precisely.
Yeah. What he did was he extracted from the Whisper D FFT tables. He extracted the spreading information.
That's
that the same that is this and created a spreading report analogous to the one that's optionally reported by the JT9 decoder used to decode FSD4W. So the spreading information is extracted from the FFT bins to look at the the how wide each of the signals is, and that gives what?
How else would you do it?
No, there's no other way to do it. It's just that in the case of Whisper D, it doesn't. Joe Taylor and Steve Franke didn't implement that as an option.
Right.
I see. This is a feature that he added with the patch, not a performance.
Yes, he didn't improve the performance. He added
got
a
it.
feature. Okay.
But
But as part
Michael,
of that process, Michael had occasion to recompile both the original
I see. That's why you were
JTX
doing it.
and this enhanced version. So what I do now is that Whisper
And both were more efficient than the distributed binary.
Okay, Michael, do you remember the compiler options when you did this rebuild?
I did not make any changes on my own. I did them.
But you didn't happen to
straight.
notice the compiler options that were being used, like what the optimization level was? And
I don't know off the top of my head. No.
Because I mean, the optimizations, as you know, can make dramatic improvements in speed. Just going from no optimization to even level 1 -01 can make a big difference. Also, there are flags you can use when you do heavy floating point arithmetic, as I assume this does, where you can break the exact IEEE 754 model slightly and it can make big improvements in speed. I do that in K9Q radio. You have to be careful because it depends on what features you're using. It usually has to do with esoteric things like how you handle not a number values and how you do underflows and stuff like that. But if you're willing to take those deviations from absolute standard behavior, you can also get substantial speed ups.
Yeah,
So
I do not
you
have the
have to get
competence to
into it,
do
look
that.
at it. What I'm saying is that there are options here. There are things to be explored that could make it still a lot faster. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it'd be great. Michael's work just by Whisper Demon now includes the binaries that Michael created as part of the Whisper Demon
Oh, okay.
distribution. Okay.
All
So that and Whisper Demon, when it starts up, it goes through and looks at all of the binaries that are there and
You have
finds the
them at least
ones.
for, I said, assume x86, 64, and
Yeah,
and
ARM,
ARM, right?
yeah, and figures out which ones are executable on the platform it's running on.
There's probably really only two that really.
There's not only there, but there's the we support the ARM 7L or whatever it is, the 32-bit ARM. So we have that, and then there's a different version for Ubuntu 22 and a version for Ubuntu 24. And Michael, I was unable. Ubuntu 20, I couldn't compile Ubuntu 20. I couldn't get JTX to compile. I downloaded their
How old
tarball
is
and
Ubuntu 20?
well, I don't know, but
Well-
I couldn't compile it on my Ubuntu 22 machine either. I got compile errors on it. So I mean, I just I really am glad you did that work, Michael, but I can't reproduce it at this point. And I've kind of given up. I've decided I'm going to buy another server for KFS and forget about trying to get Whisper Demon working on the new version of Whisper Demon running on Ubuntu 20. I mean, it's just like, my time, it'll take me hours to figure out how
Well,
to
see,
get
that's
everything.
just it. The versions, the binaries that were distributed with WSGTX may have been compiled to like run on everything at the expense of speed on anything newer. That's another thing that could have happened.
I very likely.
I mean, that's one of the
We
reasons
don't-
I haven't distributed binaries yet for CanAQ radios, because I know just from experience that this kind of code really needs to be compiled on the machine it's going to run on.
In your case, very much so.
Yeah. And it's, it's not that hard really to compile. I mean, as long as the compile, all the pieces you need or the tools you need are available, then, running a compiler is not that hard.
As I say, yeah, I had no trouble compiling your code on any machine I put it on. It's been great.
Well,
But
I always think very carefully when I'm going to add another dependency to my code. I think long and hard about it.
Well, that's it shows. It's you.
Well, the dependency list is already pretty long, and it bothers me. But
if you ever
that are available.
Yeah. Well, it's the problem, the problem I have is that I've got 100 and some sites and they all have different, they install their own servers, so I can't control it. Within reason, I'll go and try to figure out how to make things install. But if you ever install Whisper Demon, it goes on for 5 minutes with just scrolling, all kinds of libraries being installed and such, and it's just crazy. That's but in any case, so we have a
Scott made an interesting point in the discussion here. He said, with respect to the grant, at any rate, if there's a B-link provided by the grant, we should put the operating system on there, which we know is going to be the simplest and most straightforward. So,
yes, and that's
no
the intention.
desktop. It'll be headless. It won't have snaps. If
yeah.
Debian is the way to go, do it Debian.
That's fine with me.
Make
I
it
don't.
simple.
I have. Yeah.
What's a B-link? Sorry, I don't know what a B-link.
It's just it's a computer that little box about this big. Has a 5570 in it or 5700.
Oh, is that one of the NUC clones that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Rob? Okay,
People call them NUCs usually.
Never mind. Okay, I know now. Okay.
Yeah, so far it's the best combination of low cost, CPU
At,
power.
at some point, you just have to put your foot down about backward compatibility and running at everybody's machine, no matter how old it is. Bob, N5BRG, you must remember Tom Clark going on about everybody who wanted everything to run their old Commodore 64s. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you just have to put your foot down at some point and say, look, we're just not going to support that.
Well, that's what I'm doing with Ubuntu
Yeah.
20. I'm just I'm not going to try to support it.
Well, you standardize on one thing, but then people are going to be trying to run it on whatever they got laying around the
You
shed.
just say,
That's,
look, sorry, we don't support that, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I mean,
Yeah.
if you can make this stuff run a Raspberry Pi that you can buy for however many bucks, you know, look, come on, you know.
Yeah.
Just make
There's a
life
lot
hard
of
for you.
subtle things that matter too, like I'm running these Meteor cameras and they're recording all night long. They're recording multiple cameras, 4 cameras on one i5 box. So it's working the hard drive pretty hard. And then I've got them outside in the heat of Texas. And so this stuff here is going to be out in the climate too, whatever you're running.
Yeah.
And if you've got a hard drive, you could use a solid state drive or a hard drive on the computer, but you still, because of the Arrhenius function, because of heat, you're going to have failures as you heat it up. And so then you need to have a good recovery mechanism too. How you're going to get everything back and working again, because it can take 2 or 3 days to rebuild a station and get it functioning.
Yeah, if a hard drive fails, that's
So-
usually pretty slow to recover from.
Yeah, it's a hard thing here. I
Well,
did.
most of the contemporary computers though don't use rotating media anymore. I mean, the B-links include a
Well,
500.
look, SSDs
gigabyte.
can fail too. I don't know what you're using, Bob. Are you using SSDs or rotating disks?
Well, I'm using rotating disk because the reliability information on the disk that I was using was better than the SSDs.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Thermally though, or I mean,
Well,
you were just
I
mentioning the
doubt
heat.
if the data that we were looking at, what was it characterized by the temperatures that they were
Yeah.
running?
Well,
You know, you can't get that detailed typically.
I mean, if heat's an issue for the SSDs, especially, you can go on Amazon and they'll have heat sinks.
Well, the heat sink doesn't do anything but take you to your environment. You got to move
Environment's
the
too
heat
high,
out of
right?
there somehow.
Well, maybe you need to start adding Peltier coolers to our computers. I know they're incredibly inefficient, but hey, if you need to go below ambient, it's the only way, really.
Well, the other thing is that you know, you're out in the field, or I'm out in my pasture here running off of power. So what I need is a UPS system there, because if you want to keep your hard drives running or your SSD drive, you don't want to have it go down. You don't want to have that computer go down
Right.
unexpectedly. And
And
that's
I assume
probably
lightning is a problem.
the biggest problem.
Lightning is probably a problem area, right, Bob?
Well, there is lightning issues, but it's surprising to me how well the rural electric system stays up. It's mostly squirrels that cause the problem.
Okay.
Well, I've had pretty good luck with the B-links. Whisper Demon is architected to do almost all of its reading and writing is done to a RAM disk.
Oh, I wanted to
partition.
talk to you about that, but I
Yeah.
sent you the text.
So virtually everything is that all the only thing that I write to permanent storage, the SSD, are the spots, the data that we collect, that we want to be and I write that so that if there's a failure, that data is there and can be uploaded later.
Yeah, I know that SSDs are supposed to have limits on write cycles, and I really like to see the data on that to know if that's a real problem. Especially
even if it isn't a problem, Phil. Okay.
Well, but no,
in my case,
makes other things complicated.
It's a way to protect yourself also by taking different services and putting them into different file systems. If something goes wrong, okay, then only that service goes down. I had this problem with your and Phil's JT9, FT4 and 8 problems that, my configuration, whatever I messed up, and it overflowed the file system.
I
And
understand.
it took down the FT4 and 8 service, but everything else continued to run.
I understand. That's why I wrote a cron job that goes out and deletes old files. Keep that from happening.
And I learned from you how to write cron jobs, and I also learned that I needed to do more than I was doing
Yeah.
in my initial cron
Yeah.
job. So yeah, I do. I've been using the cron jobs to flush out the file systems as a backup, but that's not something I could do with the main whisper daemon stuff. It has its own backup and protection against overflow.
Well, I'm using these Dell i5 boxes that I get from a salvage guy here in Dallas for $100. Okay.
Yeah,
And he'll
they
put
were.
a 1 TB Toshiba
Yeah.
rotating drive in it.
Uh-huh.
And I can buy those drives for $30.
Yeah.
So I can build a system and then I can clone the drive and I have a second drive. So when it craps out, I can just swap the drive.
1
Mhm.
terabyte for $30. I mean,
Yeah.
aren't SSDs almost that cheap now?
Yeah, they are.
They're not too much different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
could plug SSD. He'll supply an SSD drive if you want it. I had a conversation with him about it. He thought that these were better, and I went away and looked at some data that I just Googled up, and he was right. It's a little bit better, but it's the luck of the draw. You can get a drive and it fails shortly, or an SSD and it would
Sure.
fail shortly.
Are you running smart on your drives?
No, no.
You should be. I mean, it's
I have
easy enough to
32
do.
gig of memory to try to make sure I'm not doing any swapping, but
No, just run smart. You know what smart is, right?
yeah, it's a protection thing.
Well, and smart is just invoking firmware inside the drive to go do drive surface level tests hopefully before the drive fails.
Yeah.
And all the
it also it'll
SSDs
tell you
support
things
that
like
now too.
what's that?
All the SSDs support that now as well.
Yeah, they do. I mean,
the
there isn't
decent
as
ones.
much to do in an
Oh, but they
SSD
give
as
you
there
the
is.
statistics.
Right.
Don't they block off bytes of memory too, or memory storage places as it goes along and tries to protect itself?
I think that happens in normal operation of an SSD, but I mean, that does other things. It gives you counts of the number of times that's happened, that you've had failed blocks.
Yeah, all the
It
different
does a
kinds
bunch
of
of things.
errors.
Hmm?
Yeah, all the different kinds of errors
Right.
that, write errors, read errors, but more subtle things than that.
It will also tell you what the internal drive temperatures are. I mean, that
Yes, it
alone is
will.
useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Scott says, it could be an early warning. That's why I run it. So if you are interested in knowing when your drive's about to fail, I mean, that will help.
Yeah.
Not always. I mean, I've often had like SD cards, especially with them. When they just die, they just die. One moment they're working fine, next moment there's nothing.
Most of my drives are just dumb.
Well, almost all modern drives have smart, and I've had it for many years. So
I got to go. I'll see y'all later.
See you, Bob.
Okay. See you, Bob. Yes.
Well, we've been
Okay.
here for almost 2 hours now.
Yeah. What do we have? We kind of wandered around, but I haven't updated your system, but I think you have. Did you go and update your Terry fence?
Oh yeah, I just did.
Oh,
I just did.
yeah.
I'm having some problems because I got to figure out what your conventions are and make sure all the configuration files match them, like where your spool files. And I guess you're now using Mount K9Q radio, FT4, FT8, Whisper, whatever, right? That's your current convention. We're just saying that.
My convention at KFS has been to prefix the server or the antenna, to the multicast, the name of the multicast. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the directory, the spool directories in which you keep all this stuff.
the stuff is oh gosh.
So I
It's
found that Terry wasn't reporting stuff, and I just checked, and I think there was a confusion about that. So
right.
I think you're putting all your spool files, the audio files and such, and the work files and /mount/KNIQ radio /
It's underneath your that's permanent storage. So it's underneath your Whisper Demon home directory in a wave dot.
Oh.
Okay, so everything is stored
Oh, I
underneath
didn't know you
there.
put it there. I thought you created that temp FS directory.
No, there's a temp FS. I just put it there until I can compress it into a FLAC format, and then I move it over.
Oh, well, that's
and put
for
it. Okay.
logging, right?
Yeah, well, no, it's not for logging. It's just that I record the WAV files. I make the recordings, okay, every minute, 1 minute files. They're put into that temporary directory structure with that file system. Then there's a daemon that wakes up and looks for those WAV files,
Right.
and it takes those WAV files and it runs them through FLAC and puts them under the in your home directory, underneath your home directory.
Oh. Why do that?
And so that's where all of so if you type, well, I can show you if you want, but it's
just tell me.
You type CDWW, and that'll take you to the.
Just tell me what you're doing. I mean, once they're FLAC compressed, then what?
Then I FLAC compress them, and they're stored in the directory tree underneath.
Stored indefinitely. Oh,
they indefinitely. Well, they're flushed eventually. Once the file system is by default 75% full.
Okay. Well, where do you run WhisperD? What files does WhisperD operate on?
WhisperD runs on the Dell SHM shared memory WhisperD file system. Linux creates by default a shared memory, a temp/fs file system.
Oh, I didn't know.
/dev/dev. That's on every Linux system.
I know that's another complication.
Okay, so that's where all of the Whisper daemon is in under the tree under dev SHM shared memory.
I
And
think that's unnecessary complication, but okay.
Well, where else would they go? I mean,
well, they go into a file and they're probably still sitting in the disk cache so that when you read them out, they don't even do a disk.
Yeah. So, but what happens if something goes wrong and overflows the file system? You don't want. You don't want to overflow the
file system. You got a problem anyway, right?
Well, how do you recover when I'm remotely? If I overflow a root file system,
I mean, overflowing file systems are a problem in any.
So the way I ultimately protect, especially well, when I run a bunch of other programs, like from people I don't know so well, like you, who may have bugs in their programs, and they may run wild and overflow a file system.
Okay, all right, fine.
That's how I protect. That's how I protect against. That's how I protect against.
What I'm talking about is you can't expect a program who uses a file system that overflows. You can't expect that program to behave rationally. You have to make sure that the file system is using don't overflow.
That is when you're
okay. So you were talking about the temp. Right.
Yes.
This is getting way too complicated. I mean, much more complicated than it needs to be. But I've been saying
I don't think I think Phil, you haven't really been through the all of the functionality that's been incorporated in the history and the things that I continue to support. So
that's fine. But I've been doing Linux system programming for about 40 years now, and I know a lot of the hassles and a lot of this is not new. Okay.
Well, it's anyway. This is how I've chosen to solve the problem. There may be other solutions, but this system runs at 100 different sites quite reliably.
All right.
Yeah, so including yours. So
is it fine if I ask an unrelated question?
Yes.
So like I had mentioned before, I'm trying to get Linux set up on my CNC machine, Linux CNC, and I'm trying to I'm trying to boot into Debian 12, and Grub is having an issue, and it keeps on sending me a Grub rescue, and it's saying,
Oh God, that's
yeah, it is okay. So
I've been able to get out of that, but I recommend just starting over and reinstalling unless you really know what you're doing.
I have started over and reinstalled it about 10 to 15 times now.
Wait a minute.
I've been working on this thing for 2 to 3 days now, and
Makes sense.
It's kicking my ass.
What software are you trying to use to run your CNC?
Linux CNC, but it's on Debian 12.
Okay, so it's the there's a all right there because there are a few different options. Is that is that the CAD and the CAM, or is that just the CAM?
I believe they're all together.
Okay, they're all in one. I'm not familiar.
Yeah,
I haven't tried it, but
it's all in one package. It's Linux CNC. You can, if you have a specialized machine, you can program it to do anything you want. So
yeah. Well,
no, it's a single boot. I only want it to boot Linux CNC. That's it. So.
And where do the difficulties come from? Are they usually besides this current one?
Are you talking about the where in the file system?
Well, no, just where in the process of trying to use the software. Once you've installed Debian, and then you install Linux CNC, you've been successful in getting those two steps.
Yes, I have installed it. It's when I try and boot into my hard drive that now has the fresh install of Linux that it gives me this grub loading, welcome to grub, error, file in boot grub i386-pc verifiers.mod, not found, and then it says grub rescue. So it's booting.
It may not be true in your case, but my experience is that when you fall into grub, it's almost always because it can't find a root file system.
Well, and that's what it's saying, but I'm not sure how to fix it. And I've tried looking up on the internet, and I'm not having a whole lot of luck there.
So you can get, so you really haven't got a fully function Debian system to be, that you can boot into.
And that's the